What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 173. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, Ryan Chapman and more, John Hoover in Tulsa. Gentlemen, how are we doing on this just monsoon week in Oklahoma? Is it as bad there, Hoove, as it is here? Because here it's like flooding. It's insane.
Yeah, it's been raining for like 48 straight hours. So
yes.
Good for the grass. You guys know me. Good for the grass.
Excited for the grass.
Very much. Very good for the grass. I'll take this over freezing stuff. Like, I don't mind getting a week wiped out with rain. Now, not every week, but like you guys know me. I am impartial to London a little bit, stuff like that. So the rain doesn't bother me. It's just when it starts to freeze and it becomes a hazard for me to drive anywhere is when I officially am out on whatever happens weather-wise.
Tell you what, I mean, it's okay if you stay indoors. It's kind of cozy, but if you have to actually go out, it's brutal. Yesterday, going to the Lenoble Center, we're going to talk to Porter Moser at a rough time in this season. We'll get there later, and I'm just to get the camera out and the tripod in my bag. It's just I was soaked to go like 20 steps. So God forbid anybody who has to work outside when it's like that, because it was pouring down. Yeah, yesterday, today too, but. Like Hoof said, good for the grass, I guess. Good for the grass. So we are continuing to move along here. We're in February, kind of in that stretch period as far as football goes, waiting for spring ball to come around, winter workouts. They're still going on, right? Or are they over? I honestly don't know the calendar that well.
Winter workouts are definitely still going on.
Yeah, they still do them through February. So that's what's going on with the team currently. But we do have some things to talk about, some news over the last week or so, and obviously lots of stuff for the other sports that we'll get to later on in the show as well. I think maybe the most notable thing, it wasn't going to grab headlines or whatever, but I feel like we should acknowledge it at the top, is that Alabama hired an offensive coordinator. So they bring in Tommy Rees from Notre Dame, which means Jeff Lebby is officially staying, which was something we talked about a couple weeks ago. We all thought that Jeff Lebby was going to stay, but Alabama was one of those jobs that, I said it a couple times, until it's filled, you kind of don't know, and it's filled now. So Jeff Lebby is officially staying. Good news for Oklahoma, obviously, right? I mean, we talked about at the time, that would have hurt a lot to lose him, both optically, potentially just on the field, depending on what players he takes. How do you get a replacement, and how quickly can you get a replacement, especially in February now? This was good for Oklahoma to get that done with. Bama hires a guy, and you don't have to sweat it anymore.
Yeah, Jeff Lebby's not going anywhere, but I do think you mischaracterized it a little bit. He's not officially staying. He didn't come out and give a statement or sign a new contract or anything like that. He's basically just somebody else got hired for the job that he was reportedly being considered for. Sure. So he's not going anywhere. You're right. Bad optics career-wise to leave your alma mater 1 year into the new head coach's reign, 1 year into your reign as the offensive coordinator. That would have been bad optics for Jeff Lebby. So, yeah, good for him to kind of continue to grow as an offensive coordinator. We saw some areas in his game last year where he needed to grow, and specifically clock management, what you do with the hurry up offense, and especially late in the games with a lead, with a tenuous lead. He grew. He said he'd come out of that, especially the Oklahoma State game. He came out of that a little more aware, maybe, growing as an offensive coordinator. So it's good for him. He didn't need to be going off somewhere where he really had – I mean, where's he going to have the autonomy as an offensive coordinator, as a play caller, that he has right now at Oklahoma?
Right.
The offense is his, right? Brent Venables is over there working on the defensive stuff while he's out here calling plays on offense. Venables might not even be paying attention to what's going on with the clock management situation, right? So that's something that both those guys are probably looking forward to working together, continuing to work together so they can grow together in their roles. One is the head coach, one is an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and not just the growth portion of that, because the questions we had in the non-conference slate about how quickly it rolls, tempo, all that stuff, like if you remember, this seems like ages ago, especially in a world before we saw what happened in the second half of Bedlam. But Jeff Lebby had said at one point that it's his job to understand what is best for the entire team, not just his offense. So now that they've had time to take a step back, do some self-scouting, self-evaluation, that you don't really have a ton of time to do that yourself during the season. We'll see if that growth. But also on the other hand, He just got his guy in Jackson Arnold, right? A huge quarterback commit when he landed that people said, okay, high 4-star, all that stuff. And then Jackson Arnold just grew and grew and grew, rose up the rankings, everything we talked about as far as where he started committing to, is he going to have an argument for being the best quarterback in the class, all that stuff. Okay, well, then Jeff Lebby would have also, if he had left, had a position of, do I put Jackson Arnold in a really weird spot of asking him to come to Oklahoma and then try to transfer out after the spring, transfer out after a year to join me at Alabama? Do I start from scratch? All that stuff. What was Jackson Arnold going to do? All of that goes by the wayside. It was more of a brain exercise than anything in reality, because Jeff Lebby and Jackson Arnold are in Norman with the expectation that by 2024, Jackson Arnold has put a bunch of starts under his belt and maybe even sees some time in some packages this year.
You wonder if, at least I do, if this is going to be spun into any kind of a raise / extension for Lebby, and whenever that time would come. Getting interest like that from Alabama, we don't know how far it went. We don't know if Alabama contacted him. We don't know, but it was at least out there and being reported by people who would know. Pete Thamel, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, that there was interest on at least the Alabama side of things. So at the very least, that's got to help you if you're Jeff Lebby. You're seeing that they turned their attention to Washington offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. He ended up staying with Washington, probably a similar situation there. So they end up landing on Tommy Rees, with Notre Dame. So we'll see how that shakes out. But good win for Oklahoma. Not that, again, we were ever too worried about it, but until the job is filled, you kind of have to sweat it. And Jeff Lebby looks like who said, it's not technically anything official really, but that was the one that you were worried about, and it's filled. So you don't have to sweat it now, at least in the short term. Elsewhere,
I would, I would say as it pertains to raises and contract extensions, it's probably going to happen how it always happens, which is everybody's going to get a little bump. Everybody's going to get some kind of raise, maybe a 1-year contract extension. If I were Joe Castiglione, I know this would not be popular. They're going to cut this little slice of our podcast out and they're going to post it in the Switzer Center and they're going to say Hoover hates us all. If I were Joe Castiglione, I would go to the coaching staff and say, nobody gets a raise. You guys went 7-6 last year. Let's see what you do this year. You win some football games, compete for championships again, put butts in the seats every game, and not just the spring game, but every game. Then we'll talk about raises. Then you're going to get raises. And Oklahoma gives out raises no matter what. And that's what I'm saying. I think everybody's going to get a minimal raise, standard raise, small raise, whatever you want to call it this year. But if I were Joe C., I would say, listen, I don't give raises to losers. 6-7 is losing, right? That's a losing record. So you cannot be applauded, I don't think. Maybe a position coach here or there gets something based on Venables' recommendation. Certainly there's some guys who I think position-wise earned it, but just as a whole, you can't just come in and say, okay, it's raise time, guys. Bro, you were 6-7 last year. You don't get a raise at 6-7.
Well, and you have to build the new football Death Star over there, too. So just be like, hey, all that money you guys want in raises, it'll come. But in the meantime, we're going to build that thing that's going to help us recruit regardless of who's in Norman 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
100%. So we'll see how that shakes out. Like Hoop said, they kind of always get little bumps, and so you figure that'll just happen. But it's also uncharted waters in terms of a losing season for the first time since the turn of the century, all the stuff we talked about before. So we'll see if it's any different this time, coming up this summer and things like that. Elsewhere, the story that just continues to always have new wrinkles. We've talked about it a lot over the last, really almost 2 years now. This SEC move, when is it actually happening? We kind of always thought, originally when it was first announced, if you guys can transport yourself back to the summer of 2021, we thought 2023 probably. We thought this coming season would be the one. As time went on, that seemed to be less likely, but it seemed like 2024 was probably going to be the year. But now, reporting from various places, various high-level college football reporters saying that it looks like OU and Texas may just be stuck until 2025 mainly because the TV partners, ESPN and Fox, are not happy with basically the way that it's all being worked out in terms of what you do with all of that, television capital, basically, from OU and Texas being the Big 12, now being in a different conference. Big 12 is obviously a Fox conference. SEC is ESPN. So there's kind of a lot of, shuffling around there to make that work for everybody. And it seems like that's yet another snag in this. Are we actually going to see OU and Texas stay the full thing here, or do you guys think this will still get worked out before it's all said and done? Because it just seems like there's always something when trying to get this, established.
Yeah, let me check my paper magic 8-ball here. It looks like all signs point to, right?
Right.
It looks like 2025. And I've been saying 2024 since the very beginning. 2024 would be the first year. But yeah, 2025. Insiders like Pete Thamel are reporting this. I think Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty may have been reporting this as well. The Athletic, Dennis Dodd, some others have said, insiders say, or people inside the league. It's a little bit convoluted right now. It's easy enough to understand. Fox in particular is losing a ton of really attractive inventory if Oklahoma and Texas go early, right? You lose, what was it, 8 of the highest rated 10 games involved Oklahoma or Texas last year. I mean, that's pretty standard stuff. So you lose those properties and you replace them with BYU and Cincinnati and Houston and UCF. Those you're taking a little bit of a haircut, if you will, if you're Fox. So ESPN less so because they're getting kind of money on the back end from the SEC network. I get that. Getting new inventory, getting new properties to expose in the SEC helps ESPN. So they're getting kind of fulfilled a little bit, made whole. But yeah, man, it's looking like 2025. All signs, like I said, point to.
Yeah, and I'll be curious because I thought Ross Dellinger's report had maybe the most insight. It was the last one to go out of those 3. Dennis Dodd was a day earlier than I think Matt Fortuna kind of spearheaded the Athletics. And then Ross's came out later that day. Ross Dellinger, I thought it was no coincidence that he went and got the former Fox president or CEO. I don't remember which one, because I think that was Ross saying, read between the lines, guys. There's 4 parties here, OU and Texas, the new Big 12, ESPN, Fox, and the one that everyone's interested in getting the quotes from is a Fox executive. That shows you what the holdup is. It's Fox. I thought it was really interesting there that the number that was quoted was Fox needs to make up 8 games of inventory in 2024. And then the idea being thrown out there of Oklahoma and Texas playing non-conference games in Big 12 stadiums to kind of backfill that. Well, guess what? Guess how many teams are left of the old Big 12? 8. I think that shows you what the thought is. That, and I thought it was interesting too, because I would have just total speculation said that OU and Texas would have said screw off for not going back there after it's over. But the way that Ross lined it out, it made it sound like it's not ideal, but if it helps, it's more of a logistical problem with the future schedules, things like that. I think the important thing here is, unlike the schedule coming out, the 2023 schedule, the Big 12 had to have it to the networks by February so they can start all their drafts and all that stuff and all the backdoor stuff. Every single one of those articles, Dodd, the Athletics, SIs, all said this is kind of a weird negotiation because there is an end date, but there's not. Like, things can rapidly happen. Yeah. And I know Oklahoma is still working on getting out in 2024. I know that Oklahoma feels that they can put together a list of here's where we're open to negotiate, all this stuff. And so if Oklahoma's putting that together, that feels like they're charging toward, they still think a deal can be struck. So it'll be interesting what the timeline is on Oklahoma and Texas' side as far as like what's the latest they can strike this deal to give everyone time to prepare to be out in 2024. What is their informal, in-house, self-imposed deadline? That's something that we probably just never know.
You want another indicator? I mean, Oklahoma yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, night before. It was the night before maybe. They put finally the 2023 schedule on their schedule board online. So officially it's on Soonersports.com. You can go to Sooner Sports and click on the 2023 schedule. Previously it wasn't there. If you look down south, last I checked, which was yesterday, no schedule yet for 2023 for the Texas Longhorns on the official UT website. Okay, so read into that what you will, but I think what Ryan said is right. I think OU and Texas still want to negotiate their way out, and still want to be able to start play in 2024 in the SEC. I just don't think the Big 12 and the networks are going to let them out. The reporting was that both that the Big 12 schools came to an agreement and said, okay, we'll let you out in 2024. We'll let you out of your contract a year early. They apparently have agreed to do that. But Fox, and to a lesser degree, like I said, ESPN, came out and said, no, we're not being made whole here. So that's where what Ryan's talking about with the extra games for OU and Texas to come back and play Big 12 schedule opponents in the future. That's where those networks would be made whole. So that whole thing right now is the tug of war. It's going kind of back and forth a little bit, I would think, in the negotiation room.
Well, and on the Big 12 front, too, if the Big 12 lets Oklahoma and Texas out, they reach that agreement, and Fox is like, heck no, this doesn't work for us. This is not the contract we agreed to. We're going to prorate this sucker and give you less money. Then suddenly that buyout money that we would assume Oklahoma and Texas would have paid as an agreement, which might be the last larger payday for the remaining 8, frankly, that they have in a little bit of time. Because, yes, they got more money on their new deal, but the new deal does not compete with the SEC or the Big Ten. Well, suddenly they're having to turn around and essentially either pay off Fox or subsidize the 4 new schools at the cost of what would come into their bottom line, which I think that through these entire negotiations, I would assume that the remaining 8 in the Big 12 have had that baked in the whole time of, hey, if Oklahoma and Texas leave early, there's going to be some sort of buyout, which will help juice our numbers for a year that you might not get. So it becomes very complicated and intertwined if not everyone can agree, because then you have the remaining Big 12 taking less money than what they had budgeted for, which you can't do at big time athletics. That's a killer.
It's a winding road. And as Brett Yormark said himself, I made sure to look it up so I get the exact quote. Kirk Bohls had this a few days ago at a Texas basketball game. He caught up with Yormark and he said, we'll see how it goes. Negotiations take twists and turns. That's what Brett Yormark said. So it's not over. It's not over. Like I said, there always seems to be a new wrinkle. Anytime you feel like you have a good grasp on it, one way or another, because it seemed like we had really gotten toward 24 was going to be the year. And now all this happens, but it's not over. It never is. It never is. So we'll see how it shakes out. Will this be OU's last year in the Big 12? We don't know. And we may not know. It's like the season's already over, which would be kind of anticlimactic in some ways. So we'll find out in due time. Speaking on that same vein, with the schedule, we talked about it last week. We broke it down. We had the full schedule react show. If you missed it, it's not going anywhere. It's on YouTube, podcast, all that good stuff. We broke it all down for you, all the things that jumped out to us. We kind of talked a little bit about what the toughest stretch was on the schedule. But let's kind of put, not pen to paper because it's vocal, but you get the idea in terms of what's the game on here that jumps out. Because we have the schedule now. It's officially on OU's website, like Hoof said. What's the game that, in particular, and we'll take Texas out of the equation because that's probably the obvious one, that is the biggest hurdle, I guess, on here, saying that seems dangerous for Oklahoma, Texas notwithstanding. Is there one in particular, or is it kind of just they're all the same, which I think is a valid answer here too?
Yeah, that's a good point. They are kind of a little bit all the same. There's a little bit of danger in each game. I think the most dangerous game comes in the penultimate game of the season at BYU. You're playing TCU 6 days later. The Big 12 is probably going to do what they can. They have to acquiesce to what the networks want, of course, but I would think the Big 12 is going to do everything they can to make both of those games at night. Make them primetime properties. I get the 11 a.m. thing is now the big thing for Fox, and Fox might get one of those games. I get that. That's fine. But BYU folks have already made a big deal out of it. We've got the Oklahoma Sooners coming to our place for senior night, senior day, senior night, whatever. This is a big deal to them. And it's a perfect – I don't know what BYU's record is going to be. I don't know how good they're going to be. You got to figure they're going to be competitive in every game like they usually are. This is a perfect trap game for Oklahoma when you're facing the college football playoff, Big 12, dominated, undefeated last year, regular season, TCU Horned Frogs in the final game of the season on a Friday night at your place. Perfect time for a trap game. I'm calling BYU. I'm not calling it, but I'm saying BYU is the game that is the one that to me, looks most like a loss.
Yeah, like we said, Texas is Texas, so that's the one you've got circled. TCU, a team that was in the national championship game last year, did a really nice job recruiting and in the transfer portal, but they'll be replacing Max Duggan and an offensive coordinator. But for TCU, they'll have had literally the entire season to get everything together. So short rest. Now that game's at home for Oklahoma. Short week, all that stuff. That's the one I'm looking at. But if I'm looking for, I don't think that really qualifies as like a trap game. If I was looking for a trap game, it comes in a weird spot for me because Oklahoma is coming off a bye. But I think what everyone's going to be so laser focused on is when UCF comes to town, it's the Dylan Gabriel game, playing his old team, all that stuff. I don't care about that side of the ball. Let's take a look at the other side of the football. In case you forgot, Oklahoma's defense could not stop a nosebleed last year. They've got new players coming in, players that better fit the system, sure, but those players will be halfway into their first season under Brent Venables. We saw last year, not a lot of guys got up to speed very quickly, so that may change, but I'm not going to expect that just on paper. And UCF with John Rice Plumlee was the number 16 total offense in the country last year. I know that wasn't super well publicized because UCF was tucked away in a lot of Thursday games, Saturday slate, all that stuff. But John Rice Plumlee entering his second year under Gus Malzahn. That's usually when you see transfer quarterbacks take a little step forward as they're a little bit more just comfortable in the offense, things like that. I think that's got some shootout potential just because I'm not just going to assume that Brent Venables is going to wave his magic wand and the defense is going to be a top 50 defense this year because it was so bad last year.
I'll go and complete the trifecta with the new teams. Cincinnati seems like a potentially slippery one there because just a lot of things go into that. The fact that it's on the road. I mean, this is a team that is just 2 years removed from the playoff. I know it's a lot of new faces, but it's a program that has seen pretty high heights recently. Different coach there with Scott Satterfield coming in. Luke Fickell left to go to Wisconsin. It's their first Big 12 game. And, for Oklahoma, but for Cincinnati, obviously, ever. And you got to imagine Oklahoma is in town for your first Power 5 conference game. It's going to be nutty. That has very night game blackout type of potential. And I don't know what the atmosphere is like in Cincinnati. I have no clue. I've never been there in my life. But I got to imagine they can get it juiced up for a game like that. If you can't, then your program is just not even alive at all. And I got to think that they're going to be ready for that. Like I said, just a couple years removed from the playoff, first Big 12 game. Oklahoma will not have played much of anybody yet at that point. Arkansas State, SMU, Tulsa to start the season. It's a pretty good step up in competition right there. I guess SMU, you could argue, is kind of close. But on the road, first Big 12 game, that seems to be kind of a bit of a treacherous spot there as well, just because I imagine it's going to be a bit of a hornet's nest you're walking into there. I think again, if you can't get it up for that one, then your fans base is maybe a little flat. I think it's probably going to be juiced pretty good.
I agree, Josh. I think I thought about Cincinnati. New coach, new culture.
Right.
Is it late September, early October?
Still September.
So it's in that.
Yeah.
So, they're going to be fired up. I looked at their recruiting rankings the last couple of years, 42 last year, 79 this year. So they've got some work to do. Even though they're joining the Big 12, their recruiting rankings are falling. I find that strange.
Well, keep in mind, too, with Fickell leaving and Satterfield, you had some decommits and stuff like that. So this is a transition class. I'd be more interested to see what Satterfield brought with him coming from Louisville. I frankly just haven't looked into that a lot. Obviously, for us, we took Texas off the table because OU Texas is the gem of the schedule every year. And then we talked about TCU, but I think that the fact that we all three brought up group of 5 teams, those are group of 5 rosters that are going to be playing Oklahoma, speaks to A, who the Sooners avoided on their schedule, like we said last week, and B, the fact that elsewhere across the Big 12, teams are losing a lot, and it's not like this is a conference that is beating its chest on recruiting anyway outside of TCU and Baylor. Like Oklahoma State's recruiting's a joke, and they lost everybody. Kansas is just happy that they got 85 scholarship players. You know what I mean? Matt Campbell's had to reshuffle the offense completely for Iowa State because I just think that they didn't play offense. They would have probably been better served to take a knee 3 times and punt the ball and give the defense field position not really a treacherous Big 12 slate, which is why a team that was 6-7 last year, I think there's a lot of pressure on the coaching staff to deliver a good win total, because if you can't deliver that with this schedule, what do you think that's going to look like going to the SEC?
For sure. Do you guys think, before we move on, and we're a ways away from it, we're 5-6 months away from it, but do you think Oklahoma will be the favorite in the Big 12 preseason poll, or how high will they be in the Big 12 preseason poll? Who will the favorite be? Will it be Texas?
Yes, it'll be Texas. The Ewers and Manning situation.
Yeah.
Year under Sark? How many is that now? This will be Sark's third year.
Yeah, year 3.
Agree.
So, plus the Texas Love Fest. They won enough games. Went to a bowl game last year. They're not coming off a losing record, right? So
yeah,
preseason Love Fest is always there for Texas. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's what's going to happen. I don't think Oklahoma's coming off a 6-7, and there's going to be some who vote for OU, I think, but I think it's going to be overwhelmingly Texas, and I think TCU is going to get some votes as well.
Yeah,
which is simply a dragging in the wake of last year, as the TCU going being picked to win the Big 12 this year has nothing to do with TCU this year, other than Sonny Dykes.
Yeah, if you remember the preseason poll last year, it was basically like OU, Baylor, OSU were the 3 that had separated, and technically OU and Baylor were 1 and 2, but it was those 3, then Gap. I think what it'll be this year is you'll have Texas, Kansas State, TCU, Gap, and then you'll probably have Tech, OU, maybe a Baylor, or hey, this Lance Leipold thing, it looked great, and Daniels got hurt last year. Pop them in the bottom of the second tier of the conference in that, and then you'll have kind of everything filter out. Just because, I don't, even with everything that TCU lost, I don't think anyone has any faith. Just that people don't follow Oklahoma closely. Of why would it suddenly get better? Oklahoma lost their most productive pieces on offense in Eric Gray, Marvin Mims, Braden Willis.
It's going to be interesting. I might actually have to get my vote in this time. Last year I procrastinated and I didn't get my vote in time. So maybe this time I'll try and get my vote in, because that'll be a hard poll to do. And you got the extra teams. It'll be funky to say the least. Just
email the Big 12 and tell them to watch our podcast.
Yeah.
Then they can extrapolate from what we say our votes. We don't need to vote on that, do we?
I can tell you right now,
our preseason picks are bad enough as it is.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, Houston will not be in consideration to be on the one line for me after what the season they had, and Holgorsen already bringing out the excuse machine. I don't think Houston's going to be in the running to win the Big 12 in year 1.
West Virginia too. I mean, Holgorsen has torpedoed two Big 12 programs.
Does Houston play West Virginia? I didn't even think to look at that. That'd be great if they do. Hopefully a trip to Morgantown.
The Holgo Bowl.
That'd be preferable. How are you supposed to pick
Red Bull versus Moonshine?
How are you supposed to pick that Big 12 preseason poll the teams, the preseason teams, with all the new teams coming in? I don't know what's going on with those new teams. I don't know who the quarterbacks are for half of them, so it's going to be tough to figure that out. But we got time to do that in the summer. It's going to be interesting. This year's the Super Big 12. We remember forever. What a weird season we're going to have here coming up in 6-7 months from now. All right, we'll take a timeout.
Let's just go against the grain and call it the Big 14.
The Big 14?
Yeah.
I dig it.
The Meh 14?
No
one's really happy that it's happening.
We went from 10 to 14. We're jumping all around 12. We can't actually land on 12. They'll get back down to 12, but then they want to add these other teams that they've been talking about adding, the Four Corners schools. It's realignment is not done, I think.
Pac-12's going after San Diego State and SMU. Kliavkoff is already meeting with those guys. What?
Yeah, SMU and the Pac-12
not done by a long stretch.
That's going to make Oregon and Washington stoked.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oregon
As they go to the Big 10.
USC, I can't wait to see USC or UCLA play in Minnesota in November. That's going to just be the best, the absolute best. Can't wait for that. Whenever we get there for that one. I'll take a time out. We'll come back. Got some other housekeeping things to get through in the second segment. Oklahoma added a bunch more PWOs. Talked about them last week. Some last week. They have added 4 or 5 more since. We'll talk about them a little bit. Also, some NFL draft stuff. The combine invites just came out this morning. We'll dive into that list a little bit. Who's the biggest snub and some other stuff as well as we continue along here in the AllSooners podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at all_Sooners. Ryan's _Ryan Chapman. Who's at Johnny Hoover. I'm at Josh Callaway. Our website is allsooners.com. We're a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All right, segment 2. Bunch of housekeeping items here to get through, and then we'll get to some other sports to wrap up the show in the final segment. We'll start with a little bit of NFL draft stuff here. So I'll start with the Senior Bowl, wrapping that up a little bit. Didn't have anybody who had a huge week a la Perion Winfrey of last year. Remember, he was game MVP and all that. He kind of used that as a springboard. The big winner of the week, seemingly to me at least, was Eric Gray. Was on most people's, biggest standouts or whatever. Eric Gray usually found his way on there. He was named the running back practice player of the week, which is voted on by the other players, which is important to note that he stuck out enough. Most seem to really like his interview. We know from first-hand experience he is a good interview, very well-spoken, leader, all that kind of stuff, mature, all that kind of good stuff. It's a running back class where he's kind of around the back end of the top 10, maybe just outside the top 10 running backs, depending on where you look. So these kind of things are big for him. Big week for him, though, in Mobile. Anything else that stuck out to you guys from the Senior Bowl? Again, nobody like Perion that just took over the thing. You had Jalen Redmond there and the lineman Harrison and Wanye. Anything else that stuck out?
Yeah, that's the MVP thing, the most valuable running back or the outstanding running back, whatever it was, voted on by the other team's linebackers, I think. So the linebackers vote on the running backs, the DBs vote on the wide receivers. You remember a couple of years ago, Trey Brown went to, left early, opted out of the Cotton Bowl, went to the Senior Bowl, and the other team's wide receivers voted him the most outstanding defensive back. So it's a pretty impressive award. Trey Brown overcame an injury and was on the field last year for the Seahawks. So this is something that, makes a difference when your peers who you're competing against specifically tell the coaching staff, that's the dude right here. That's him. That's the guy. So for Eric Gray to do that this week, a lot of maturity. You mentioned the word, Josh, a lot of maturity in his game, in that from the very first spring that he was at Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley and DeMarco was the running backs coach. Cale Gundy was the wide receivers coach. Remember that? And we asked those guys about him. The answer was always related to his ability to pick up the offense quickly, his ability to see the big picture and incorporate his skills into the game plan or the practice plan or, whatever the scheme was that the coaches were trying to implement. He was able to adapt himself to it. Very versatile, catches the ball, makes a great first move, one cut kind of guy. But he's got a second and third cut as well. And one thing that stood out to me watching his Senior Bowl this last week was the size of his thighs. And that takes me back to media day last year where I asked him, I said, kind of describe some of your strengths. And he said, one of my strengths is moving, cutting and getting away from the first guy. He said, but I think another one of my strengths, and that's from the weight room this past year, is my leg strength. He said, when I do squats or when I'm trying to break tackles or whatever. And I thought back to the 2021 season and I thought, I don't remember him breaking a lot of tackles. What's he talking about? Well, spin that forward to an entire offseason at Oklahoma, right? An entire offseason in the weight room, getting bigger, getting stronger. And put him on the field in 2022. He broke a ton of tackles last year. So something happened in his game where he got bigger, stronger, faster in the offseason and translated that. Now you take all those skills that I talked about, passing, pass blocking, not passing, catching passes, pass blocking, all that stuff. You take all those skills and put them together, all of a sudden the NFL goes, hey, come here. We got something for you to do over here in this thing called the Senior Bowl. That's why he stood out. He's an all-around guy with a lot of dynamic skills.
Yeah, totally agreed. And the important thing too, we've talked about this before. It's not a new train of thought, anything like that. But running backs are running backs in the NFL. They have as little draft value as they ever have. So unless you're Bijan Robinson, then you need to come in and have great interviews. You need to have coaching staffs and be like, you know what? We can spend a late round pick on this guy. He's going to come in, learn the offense, keep his head down, work. He's not going to complain if he's in a running back by committee, stuff like that. And he's got a versatile skill set from catching the ball, like you said, being able to run over guys. Eric Gray's pass blocking kept him on the field a ton. We know with DeMarco Murray, if you can't pass block, you're not going to get on the football field. It is what it is. That's what DeMarco Murray values. And that's what Eric Gray and DeMarco Murray had talked about each other, is that Eric Gray was stoked he got to learn from a running back the caliber of what DeMarco Murray did in the NFL. DeMarco Murray was stoked with how Eric Gray is everybody take a drink every time DeMarco Murray called him a pro, and you would have not made it through media day, because that is how DeMarco, that's just his characterization of Eric Gray. So I think all of that, one of those things that we'll talk about the production and how, we're going to look back in 5 or 6 years and go, I don't think anyone appreciated what Eric Gray did in this season. When you talk about the list of Oklahoma running backs, single season accomplishments, and where Eric Gray landed up because of the losing season, he was kind of tossed in there. But I think that he's a guy that's going to come in and maybe flash for an NFL team for 2 or 3 seasons, one of those young running backs. So as far as the other guys go, I wasn't sitting watching every single drill of the Senior Bowl. It was something that was on in the background while I was home. Sounded like Wanye had some highs, had some not so great moments, which is kind of just to be expected when you're going up against guys like that. So I don't think anyone hurt their stock by any means, but I just don't think that you're going to get a Perrion Winfrey arc where, if you remember, Perrion Winfrey ended up getting drafted exactly where we thought he was going to be drafted before the Senior Bowl anyway.
Jalen Redmond, too, had a good week last week. You saw several media types who go to these things and assess the mock drafts and stuff like that, right? A lot of people came away saying Jalen Redmond, violent hands, an incredibly quick first step. He's got a lot of upper body, just in terms of where his body balances out. He's very top heavy, but he's very quick with his lower body. He's very quick and explosive with his feet. He can move his feet and get that mass going forward. And he's a guy that, he's got a little bit of a pedigree. He's got some 5-star to him. He's got some, 3 years of starting experience at Oklahoma, right? So he's a guy that I think is going to have a really good future in the NFL. I'm not saying an all-pro or anything like that, but he's a guy that's definitely going to get drafted, definitely going to be in the NFL for a long time, because he, assuming he's durable, because he had a few injury and illness situations in his career, but assuming he's durable, I think he sticks around a long time. I think him and Eric Gray both. And, of course, we all know Marvin Mims, right? He wasn't at the Senior Bowl, but just in terms of his draftability and explosiveness and where he ranks among Oklahoma receivers in history, he's right up there.
Yeah. Real quick.
Yeah.
You mentioned not the Senior Bowl. Michael Turk at the East West Shrine Bowl, this should come as no shock to anyone listening to this. He boomed a ton of punts, and people were like, oh, hey, that punter's pretty good. We should maybe pay attention to him. That comes as no shock to, I think, any Oklahoma fan who's seen Michael Turk go to work. But
the hang gang you're talking about.
Yeah, correct. The hang gang.
Yeah,
the hangers.
Yeah. Spinning off that, all the 4 of the Senior Bowl guys, I mentioned the combine invites came down this morning. They all got invited. Eric Gray is going to be there, along with Anton Harrison, Wanya Morris, and Jalen Redmond, along with a few others. Marvin Mims, like who've just referenced, Michael Turk, like Ryan just referenced, and then Braden Willis also getting an invite. So 7 guys invited to the combine for Oklahoma coming up here later this month. The biggest snub, probably Deshaun White. I think that's what we agreed upon, when we were playing the show. That's a tough one. It's really hard to get drafted. You don't get invited to the combine. It's hard. A lot of guys get invited. It's like 300 something. So it's tough. It's a tough one right there. I mean, there's a few other guys who maybe could have. Jeffrey Johnson, Justin Broyles, I guess maybe. But those 7 guys get invited. And for the other guys, I mean, attention goes to pro day pretty much now.
Justin Broyles had the distinction of playing in an all-star game I've never heard of.
Absolutely
which is in his 8th year,
of.
I think. Like what? There's an NFL All-Star game in Orlando, Florida, after the Senior Bowl. I'm like, what? I didn't know that. So congratulations to him. He impressed some people down there in Orlando again. Who did you say? Braden Willis had a fantastic week at the Senior Bowl. I wish I had mentioned him at the top. People are seeing Braden Willis kind of like we looked at him through the looking glass of 2022, where Lincoln Riley and his staff didn't really know exactly what to do with him. They knew they wanted a one of those pivotal position type guys that you can put them all over the field and you can do various things with them. Jeff Lebby said, that's my tight end. That guy is going to play tight end. We're going to play him in line. We're going to play him flex. We're going to play him in the backfield some. We're going to play him. Hey, we're going to play him at Wildcat quarterback. So we got to see the full frontal Braden Willis, right? We got to see everything that guy can do in 2022. I think NFL people right now and people who do the mock drafts and people who media who create these things, they're looking at Braden Willis right now and they're going, hey, that dude's really freaking good. That dude is unbelievable. And they're looking at his blocking numbers and they're looking at his run blocking numbers. So watch when he goes to the combine, Braden Willis. When he goes to the combine, he's going to be doing stuff. And the NFL coaches and scouts and GMs and stuff, they're all going to be like, wait a minute, who is this guy now? Well, can we see some more film on him? We need to see that dude 81 for an interview tomorrow afternoon in our little room. He's going to blow up at the combine.
Yeah, absolutely. He's another guy that when you turn it on, the run blocking is going to speak for itself. Obviously, his production in the passing game. And then people are just going to bring him into the interview room, and he's just going to dazzle. Like, he's one of those guys. He's going to dazzle. He has always been about the team. He has always been about, whatever you need me to do. And I think that his responses talking about what his grade was coming out of last year and then coming back and basically – we saw in bits and pieces on Twitter in the offseason of, oh, you don't think I'm athletic enough? Oh, you don't think I can block well enough? Hold my beer. Watch this. And he just went out and erased all those questions in every area. So I think he's someone that, to Hoove's point, that team's just going to really enjoy. They're going to eat up that. Deshaun White, I just don't understand how that invite doesn't go out with what he did. This was his best season for me. He was not the issue on that Oklahoma defense. And I think that he was even in a spot where he got to go out and play in space, and athleticism was even more on display. And then, Josh, you mentioned there are a ton of invites that go out, ton. Was a little surprised, maybe like raise an eyebrow that like a Jeffrey Johnson didn't at least get a look, because when it goes through stuff, he's coming from Oklahoma. That's going to help you in a combine situation. But also, if anyone pulled up and saw like his stats from last year, now 2 years ago, his final year at Tulane, and then the stats didn't match up here. But you have to think that combine guys maybe watched Cheez-It Bowl and thought he blew up a couple of those plays, stuff like that. It was just a little eyebrow raise. Not that he had a season that was like, oh, this guy has to be at the combine, but a lot of people get invites to this thing.
I didn't think Deshaun White was going to get an invite to the combine until I saw him play Cheetah last year, right? Like, I thought he was just an undersized, try-hard linebacker, but you put him in the Cheetah position, flex him out, tell him to go cover this guy, cover that guy, come inside and stop the run. All of a sudden, he becomes one of their best defensive players on the entire team last year. And that's the part that surprises me, is he was allowed to get out and kind of display his skills, and then he didn't get a combine invite. What?
Yeah, Deshaun White kind of reminds me of Parnell Motley not getting an invite 2-3 years ago. Where everybody was kind of like, excuse me? And Parnell Motley never really got the chance to really latch on. So you hope that doesn't happen with Deshaun, because that not having a combine invite makes it hard to get drafted, obviously. And then that's the whole thing. That's what jumpstarts your whole career. So we'll see what he does in the pro day. That's like I said, that's where that becomes very important.
Well, and here's an advantage that Deshaun's going to have that most guys who do not get a combine invite don't get afforded. It's not just the Oklahoma logo that's going to be attached, so everyone's going to be at OU's pro day anyway. So, like, he's not going to get missed. But it's not going to hurt when an NFL GM picks up the phone and says, I need more info on Deshaun White. Who am I calling? Oh, I'm calling Brent Venables to talk about one of his linebackers. That's going to go a long way.
For sure.
You think they might call Alex Grinch?
Sure not calling Brian Odom, I guess. I don't think that's maybe Minnesota would call Brian Odom. I think they were pretty pleased with what they got. The Chargers might as well.
Yep.
I was gonna say too, is there anybody more made for the combine than Braden Willis? The guy's weight room Willie. I mean, that's the underwear Olympics is like perfect for him because he's just as physically imposing as anybody. He's just huge. He's Terminator, Hulk. He's one of those type of guys, and so he's gonna impress at the combine. So good for him to get an invite to that. He's gonna impress. That's in the interviews, like we said, he's gonna have a good combine. You can feel that coming from a mile away. Some PWOs for Oklahoma. We talked about this last week. They added a bunch, mainly on the offensive line. This time around, it's all offense here. They signed 4 more guys. I'll run through them real quick. You guys can give your takeaways. Carson Horton, he's a quarterback from Texas. Trey Brown, a receiver from Nashville, Tennessee. Patrick Cromer, a receiver from Georgia. And then Emmett Jones, who's the son of the receivers coach, Emmett Jones. Love it because listen to his home Texas. That's obviously where Emmett Jones came from. He's a wide receiver / DB, can kind of go both ways here. But all 4 guys here are offensive players, including a quarterback in Carson Horton. Takeaways here from this group. I can't speak for all of them. I know Patrick Cromer was at the Brent Venables camp in the summer. So some of these guys have had kind of relationships with these guys going for a while, even going back in some cases to when Brent was still at Clemson, talking to some of the Clemson coaches there. So these are guys who I think Brent Venables just feels good about having on his roster, on his team.
Yeah, fleshing out the preferred walk-on offers is what this would be called, filling out the roster, so to speak, getting guys in here that want to be here, getting guys in here that can lend value at their specific positions. In the case of Horton, it's interesting, 2,000 yards passing, 52% passer in his senior year. I think that was his only year to start. So he's athletic enough. He ran for 500 yards and some touchdowns. His team had a winning record, made it to the playoffs, but if you look, he's a roster guy. He's a guy that's going to come in and help run the scout team. Think about, they've got Dylan Gabriel, obviously. They've got Jackson Arnold, obviously. They've got the two backups, Davis Bevel and General Booty. Who left? Nick Evers left. Ben Harris left last summer. Ralph Rucker left, right? And then Micah Bowens left. You lost 4 quarterbacks in the past 8 months, 7 months. So at some point, you're going to have to replace those guys, and that's this is the first step of that with Horton.
Yeah, and for the rest of those guys, this is what every coaching staff will preach, but Brent Venables is no different, is that you have to approach the scout team as this is a chance for me to show why I shouldn't be on the scout team. And if you've got a bunch of guys doing that, that's going to prepare your team. That is made a lot easier if you have a large preferred walk-on pool to choose from as far as, hey, Josh, you're not giving me the effort that I need today. I'm going to go over there, and he may not have the height, weight, stars that you had coming in, but he's going to work his tail off. So you can just sit your butt on the bench and you can take no snaps today and you can watch that and see if you come back with a better attitude tomorrow. Like that's what building this out's going to be. Like we've mentioned before, there's so many of them that one of them's likely to make a play that everyone pops up and says, what's going on here? Not that they'll be established stars or anything like that, but that's kind of the value of continuing to add guys. And also, this staff is about building relationships. If you look, a guy from Georgia coming in, right? A guy coming in from the Nashville area. It helps to have those guys on your roster, so you have an excuse to kind of pop in, be around those high school coaching staffs that'll help you in recruiting on down the line.
Yeah, 100%. And when those guys pop up and make that random play, we will backlink you to AllSooners.com because there are stories for all these guys. Every single one. There's not always a lot of intel on these guys. Some of these are tough, but there's at least some information about all these guys. So if you want to learn more about them, AllSooners.com, point you that way, look for them, search their names, and you'll find them. Sticking with Brent Venables, we won't talk about this real long, but I do want to acknowledge it real quick. It's kind of cool. And Hoover, you're at the story, so I'll let you kind of steer the ship here on it. He's elected to the, let's get this right, Garden City Community College Athletics Hall of Fame as a player, because that's where he played before transferring to Kansas State. He was a JUCO product at first. That's got to be pretty cool for him to get that opportunity and, another little notch on his belt.
Pretty cool for him and pretty cool for Garden State, right? To have one of their alumni go off and become one of the best high school, best college football defensive coordinators in the country, right? That's one of their guys. And then all of a sudden he gets a head coaching job at a school like Blue Blood, like Oklahoma. It was, the timing is weird. You would think that somebody would get inducted into the Hall of Fame at their school or JUCO or whatever after a championship season or something like that. Brent comes out and goes 6-7 his first season and gets inducted into the Hall of Fame. But that's neither here nor there. Huge congratulations to Brent. This is my prediction, the first of many high school, college, junior college athletic Hall of Fames that he's going to be in. It's pretty cool. The athletic director said, anytime he's one of the best defensive minds in all of college football. And anytime you tell his story, you start it with Garden City Community College. So of course they put him in their Hall of Fame. So that's pretty awesome for both Brent and Garden City.
No, absolutely. And it's like you said, Hoove, it's the start of what Brent Venables and Oklahoma will hope to be many, many, many of those little plaudits that you just get to tack on. But we know Brent, that had to mean a ton to him just because he's got those deep roots everywhere he's been. Partly because he's not been a ton of places. Garden City, yep. K-State, Oklahoma, Clemson, Oklahoma. End of list.
End of list. Yeah, that's a good point. And he'll have his did he get a plaque? Does he get a gold jacket? How does that all go? We'll have to see.
Garden City's got to be green, don't they? If your name's Garden City, aren't your colors
like the Masters,
green? I don't know jacket? That to be true. I'm just making the assumption.
Ryan's going to look it up for us. Hopefully, maybe he'll get a bust. He'll get the NFL Hall of Fame or a plaque. At the like in Cooperstown, get him something. Get him something to have up there at Garden City.
In a bit of an upset, Garden City appears to be yellow, brown, and white,
Wyoming style.
Yeah.
So I think that they're leaning into the soil portion of the gardening.
What's the mascot?
Yeah, the
Bronkbusters.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I read that in the story. That's a wild. What even is that?
You don't know what a Bronkbuster is?
No.
It's a rodeo cowboy.
That's kind of cool.
You're busting Broncos. Got to break them horses.
I'm all for not having another Lions or Panthers,
right?
Or
Bulldogs, Tigers, Wildcats.
Hey, yeah, I'm on board for being different. That's for sure. Bronkbusters. That's a new one for me. All right. Wrapping up here this segment, a little NFL talk. As soon as the
I'm
NFL,
going to send you to a rodeo this summer, by the way, Josh.
I live in the right state for it. We're neighboring on some states for it.
Josh and I actually just going to go to the Houston rodeo. And we're just going to go to the concert part of it and call it a day.
Yeah, I'm a rodeo novice. I got to admit. Wrapping up the NFL, did you guys watch whatever the hell this Pro Bowl games thing was? Did you guys try to watch this thing?
Josh Jacobs, this bleep is stupid.
I concur.
The best part of it was Peyton Manning just being absolutely livid that he was losing the game and then yelling about the fact that they couldn't take a knee on the last play of the game.
He was mad because they took a knee in a flag football game.
Well, you're not allowed to run the ball inside the 5.
Right.
And they took a knee at like the 3, and Peyton's screaming, "You can't run! You can't run!"
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson just waving by as Peyton is berating the poor flag football.
He did not want to lose to Eli. I think that's just
Miles Garrett dislocated toe.
Yeah, he jacked up his toe.
So
not good. He was
this
doing
whole
like
thing about let's not get guys hurt playing in the Pro Bowl. That's stupid because you had a guy doing agility drills and he dislocated his toe. Just say you're a Pro Bowler. Give him a little plaque.
Yeah.
A little certificate, right, with the gold star on it, and say you are a Pro Bowler. End of your season has ended. You don't have to go compete.
It was silly.
Stop trying to make money off these dudes' injuries.
It was silly, but it didn't stop Oklahoma guys from making an impact. CeeDee Lamb and Mark Andrews both with 2 touchdowns each in the flag game. Kind of cool to see those guys make an impact. So yeah, not a huge fan. Let's just go back to the regular game. That's terrible. I like that better than the whatever I just witnessed in Vegas. That thing was whack. That thing was whack to me. Looking ahead to the Super Bowl though, got that coming up this weekend. We talked about it last week. Just gobbles of OU guys in this game. So let's pick it. Who are we going with? You guys going to go with Jalen Hurts and Lane Johnson and the like, or are you going to go with Creed Humphrey, Orlando Brown, James Winchester, and the like with the Chiefs?
Here's the deal. I think the Eagles have better players overall. They have a better 53, right? But in terms of who are the most important players, I think the Chiefs have the most important player. The Chiefs have the best player, Patrick Mahomes. So kind of almost balances out. I see a good game coming. 28-24 Eagles is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, the last time the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, it was a patchwork offensive line because of injuries, and it wasn't a bad group to start the year, but it wasn't an elite unit or anything like that. They immediately, that next offseason, went out and made big changes. Orlando Brown and Creed Humphrey were a big part of that. So I'm not expecting either one of unless we just see one of the quarterbacks implode as far as mistakes go, or like a lot of fumbles. I'm not seeing just like a uncompetitive. What did that Tampa Bay Kansas like 30-9 or something like that? I don't see that.
Yeah.
I see a really great game, two really, really just well-constructed teams in different ways, right? The Chiefs are spending a ton of money at the quarterback position. So they said we have to spend money on offensive line and patch together wide receiving core, all that stuff, get a pass rush going. Philly is just across the board excellent. But guys, there's no way I'm picking the Chiefs. There's no damn way that I'm picking the Chiefs to win a Super Bowl. It's not happening. So give me Jalen and fly equals fly, baby.
Hey, forget about quarterbacks for a minute. These two teams have the two best centers in all of football. You got your two all-pro guys. You got your first team all-pro, your second team all-pro. Build your team around a center, right? And they'll take you all the way to the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
With all respect to Jalen and what they've done, I just don't have him into pick against Patrick Mahomes pretty much ever. They are the Patriots now. That was kind of my feeling with the Patriots for a very long time. It's just silly to ever bet against the Patriots, and that's kind of how I feel about Mahomes and the Chiefs now. It's just they're just different. Mahomes is different, so I'll take the Chiefs. 31-27.
31-27, good pick. Mahomes has that ankle, and he's going up against a defense that's trying to set the all-time record for sacks by a defensive team. So I think they're going to get after him. I think he's going to have a hard time moving around. He'll do some things, but not Patrick Mahomes sounds stupid. Is not Patrick Mahomes, right? If he's not able to do things and run around and create, he's not the same quarterback.
It's going to be fun. Looking forward to the game on Sunday, and we'll see if Jalen Hurts can become the first former Oklahoma quarterback not named Troy Aikman, if you want to count him, to win the Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens on Sunday night from Arizona. All right, we'll take a timeout. We'll come back, get some other sports. More things will be said about this men's basketball team. We will address those rumors floating around Mr. Moser. Talk about a little women's hoops as well. And softball season starts tomorrow. Can you believe that? We'll talk about that as well tomorrow right here or coming up next on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast, episode 173. Hit some other sports here on the way out, then we'll send you on your way into your weekend. Oh boy, here we are talking about men's basketball again. How does it change? 2 weeks ago, we read the obituary on this team. Last week, we were talking about that Bama game, which was just unbelievable. Couldn't believe it happened, and it has become even more unbelievable over time because since last week's show, they got absolutely plastered by OSU at home in front of a overcapacity crowd. I wouldn't even call it a capacity crowd, overcapacity. Ryan, I had never seen Lloyd Noble Center like that. It was crazy, packed to the gills for Bedlam, and they got absolutely smoked from the start. And then they went to Morgantown, the team that they'd already beaten once this year, and got absolutely dismantled by the Mountaineers in Morgantown. The team looks like they've given up. They're 12-11. They're firmly out of the tournament currently. Vibes are bad. I mean, what can you say right now? It's this team. The thing that was true about Porter Moser teams for the first year and a half, that is unequivocally true, is that they play hard and that they were competitive, always competitive. They lost a lot of close games, but they battled. These last couple of weeks, the Alabama game notwithstanding, have just been no-shows. I don't know what's going on right now, but they're clearly below. They're at best the 9th best team in the Big 12, and we'll see what happens when Tech comes to town in a couple of weeks because it's bad right now. I mean, this is unbelievable.
what's going on with the team effort? I've heard this thrown out there a couple of times, and I kind of echo this in my own sentiments just from watching the team. I'm not there a lot, and I don't get to interview these guys. Certainly don't get to watch practice, interact with the team. But has Porter lost the team? Has Porter lost the locker room? It looks like yes, affirmative. He has. I don't think that's very arguable, especially when you put it in the terms that you just did, Josh. One thing you can always count on from him is effort and intensity and focus and let's go and all that stuff. They're not getting that. Forget about the fact that they're not shooting well. Some could say they don't shoot well. They can't shoot well. I'm not going to be that one person who says that. I'm going to say they're not shooting well. I think they have the capacity to shoot, but they're not shooting. What about rebounding? When Oklahoma State is getting offensive rebound after offensive rebound after offensive rebound, yes, it goes back to being less athletic than your opponent, and your opponent is more athletic than you every night in the Big 12. But when you put those two things together, you're not rebounding, so you wonder about effort. You're not shooting well, you're wondering about ability, and you put them together and you get athletic ability, right? Are you less athletic than everybody else? At what point does coaching come back in and X's and O's and start moving guys around? And Porter, to his credit, has tried that a number of different ways, has moved some guys around, changed the lineup, starting lineup, rotations, gone small ball lineup. At what point does I don't know what the answer is. Don't ask me what the answer is. But at what point does the coaching step in and overcome those things where, okay, maybe I have lost this team, so we're going to try something different. I don't think you can do like a team building exercise, like a ropes course, right, in the middle of the season. I'm not talking about that, but something somewhere in the makeup of this team between the what's going on in practice and the application of that practice into the game, something's got to change.
Yeah, a few points covering kind of what you brought up there, Hoove. So on the lost the locker room, this is something that Bob Przybylo and I, at two different points in the season last year, asked Porter about. Because from the outside looking in, he's a very demanding coach in the way of energy on the sideline is great until you're losing every single game. And he micromanages the offense. We've talked about it. It's disgusting basketball. It's an epidemic in college basketball. Porter Moser's leading the charge in the Big 12 of I have to call a set every time because I have to physically outcoach somebody and run this offense. Okay, well, when you're getting your teeth kicked in, this is just me. I was never a high-level athlete. I was never a mid-level athlete. But if I can see, hey, no matter what we do, we're getting just roasted, I don't want to get screamed at over and over and over again by the coach because clearly what's happening with this roster put together. So we asked last year, Bob Przybylo asked kind of early in the conference season if you were worried about losing the locker room. Porter was he was not like unkind. He was defiant at the question. He didn't like reject the question, say it was a bad question, but he was like defiant, like, no. That's not happening. We haven't lost it. I circled back halfway to 3/4 of the way through the conference slate. Same thing, not disrespectful to the question, but like almost like with an all due respect, no, that's not a concern. We're not worried about that. And you saw that. The locker room's lost. I mean, they gave up in Stillwater. They gave up in Fort Worth. They gave up in Norman. The only thing in Norman that made that thing a 10-point game was the fact that the bench came in and hit a couple of threes, and that was like the second string bench. And it was not even a contest in Morgantown. So, like, the locker room's lost. It's gone. See ya. On the other front, Porter, through the first part of the year, talked about if we're losing close games, I'm not making drastic changes. To his credit, as the games have gotten worse, you saw in Morgantown, there was a change in the starting lineup. Joe Bamisil entered the rotation after playing, I think it was 6 or 7 minutes in Big 12 play. He was like one of the first guys in. So Porter did make those what would be drastic changes. But Josh, you put this out there. The starts to the last 3 Big 12 games have been awful. 11-0 hole against TCU. I think it was, you said a 12-2 hole against OSU. It was 10-2 against West Virginia.
And they give up right there. It's over right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And OU was able to kind of battle back against West Virginia, cut it to 3, and then the Mountaineers went on this huge long thing. Like, there are no options down low. That's a roster problem. That's a Porter Moser issue. There are no other options you can go to. He's tried to shake it up. They're just bad. They're a bad basketball team. Not by Big 12 standards, not by anything. Like, Oklahoma's a bad basketball team. They're likely going to win maybe one more game the rest of the year. You can't lose to Texas Tech at home, the other bad basketball team in this conference. But everything else, going on the road to Waco tonight, like, no, it's just not going to happen. That's not a team play with confidence. That's not a team play with belief.
It's as low level of play as we've seen from any Oklahoma team in a long time. Tanner Groves fouled out in 11 minutes on Saturday. 11 minutes! And then Sam Godwin, who's the backup 5, fouled out in 13 minutes. I mean, that's just a bona fide, you're not even belonging on the same floor with the team you're playing. That's why that happens. It's hard to figure it out because they did smoke Alabama. They do have some nice wins. They have been competitive against good teams. This team almost won in Fog, believe it or not. But that team is gone. It's bad. Do you have anything you want to add, Hoof?
No, not really. Not when you put it that way. I mean, that sums it up.
It's rough. It's rough. And now let's go and address the rumors real quick. These are rumors floating around that Notre Dame job is open from the Twitter account Coaching Changes. Now, I don't know how much to put in the Twitter account Coaching Changes. Okay, they have 23,000 followers. Do with it what you will. That's how I frame it. I'm just presenting it to you. But they tweeted yesterday, we are told Porter Moser is doing everything he can to get the Notre Dame job and that Notre Dame is equally interested. This doesn't help. This doesn't help. You've lost the team. This doesn't help. Now, I've seen a lot of people ask, why would Porter Moser do this? Why would Notre Dame be interested? Those have been the two big questions. I think they're both very easy answers. A, for Porter, if he feels like this isn't working, then take another P5 job while you can get it. If he really thinks like, Oklahoma, this is not going to happen, I'm not going to be able to turn this around. Not that he feels like he's going to be fired, because I would be shocked if he got fired this season. I think he's back next year at the least.
Yeah.
But if he thinks I don't think this is going to happen, take another P5 job and start fresh while you still can. Because if he got fired from OU, he's probably going back to something small. For Notre Dame, I mean, Loyola Chicago, for lack of a better term, is kind of like Notre Dame light. It's very similar culture. It's close to home for Porter, so they can sell themselves on that. I think it makes total sense for both parties, both Porter and Notre Dame, for him to make that move. So we'll see if it happens. But what do you guys make of that rumor, though?
Oklahoma's been to, I'm guessing at this, right? Oklahoma's been to more Final Fours than Notre Dame, at least in the last 40 years.
I'm almost certain,
I think that's the case. But I'm going to call a Notre Dame basketball a better basketball job than Oklahoma. The arena, the whole ACC thing, the tie in there, the Chicago ties, obviously, he's being from that area, obviously. If you're Porter Moser, why would you not take the Notre Dame job if it's available, if it's presented to you, if the terms are agreeable, right? It's a bad look for Oklahoma. And I'm not saying he's leaving. I'm just saying if that were to take place, that would be a bad look for Oklahoma, that you hire a mid-major guy to come in and get the program going in a certain direction. And after 2 years of mediocrity, one team doesn't make the NCAA tournament. The other team might not even make the NIT. He goes off to coach Notre Dame. Now, my question is this: is he not coaching himself out of the Notre Dame job? If you're an athletic director and you watch Oklahoma basketball right now and say, that's our next coach, what are you seeing? What are you seeing if you're the Notre Dame AD that you like that Porter Moser's putting on the floor right now?
Yeah, 78 is the only Final Four Notre Dame's ever been to, per Wikipedia. So don't make me look dumb, Wikipedia. So this is kind of a conversation that I can't remember if I was having it with you, Josh, or it might have been talking to Eli Letterman, but I think that Oklahoma, or just Porter Moser, is a better tournament team, a better non-conference team than a conference team, if that makes sense, because Porter micromanages the hell out of every single offensive possession. In the Big 12, you're just like, twice a year, we got to prepare for Porter Moser's sets. As you get more and more into the conference, they know those. We've seen Oklahoma go out to a marquee non-conference game last year against an Arkansas team that wants to run and gun a little bit. They weren't ready for the defensive sets. OU hit threes. It opened up the offense. Things look good. This year, OU didn't hit those threes against Arkansas. Didn't happen against Auburn last year either, because they were, the number one team in the country. But you welcome in number 2 Alabama, the team that leads the country in pace. They want to run. What happens? OU plays really good defense. They shoot 68% from the floor in the first half. They hit the threes. It opens things up. And suddenly, if that were a tournament game, Porter Moser's busted the bracket wide open. He's playing easier teams from there, all that stuff. And the ACC is not what the ACC used to be in basketball, top to bottom. So from the Notre Dame perspective, I don't think Porter Moser can't coach or anything like that. I just think that his style at Oklahoma is not going to attract highly touted transfers, because if you're a transfer, why would you want to go and play in the anti-NBA basketball? No one has an NBA future playing under Porter Moser, because it's so different than what NBA basketball is. And that's the guys you're playing against night in and night out in the Big 12. That's not the case in the ACC. So from that perspective, I think that's what Notre Dame would be looking at. And then all the regional ties, you have to imagine Porter would be a better recruiter in the Chicago area than he is in Oklahoma, just because he's spent so much of his time in the Chicago area.
Same with the facilities too, Ryan. The facilities are not going to attract 5-star high school recruits or big-time transfers.
Yeah.
You're fighting an uphill battle.
And Notre Dame's basketball arena is nice. I remember visiting that thing when everybody made their trip up to South Bend a few years ago. It's not like oh my gosh, you put millions and millions and millions and millions. It's modern, it's new, it's nice, way easier to recruit to than the LNC.
Well, I mean, we talked about that before. And the LNC is a bottom, probably 4 or 5 Power 5 arena in the country. It's real low, real low. It's amazing. It's wild that we've gotten here, because I mean, I refuse to do the revisionist history thing as far as the hire was beloved. People loved this hire, and me included thought this was going to work for sure. I'm, it's year 2. You're hesitant to say this is pull the plug. It's not working, but man, this is it's nuts how bad this season has been. It really is, because last year a thrown together team. They were pretty competitive, almost made the tournament. And this year, they're not competitive.
He cleaned house after year 1, right? A bunch of transfers coming in first year. He cleaned house. He's going to have to clean house again after year 2. You got a bunch of transfers coming in next year. You have no chance of building culture if you're Porter Moser in year 3. You're going to bring a bunch of guys back in year 3 and say, this is the direction, this is the vision, like after the Alabama game. This is the vision that I had. That's gone. So, yeah, you're going to have to start over again, and that's just how can you win in a league like the Big 12? How can you win doing that every year, 3 years in a row?
Yeah, and not to beat this drum over and over again, but he's going to have to evolve too. There are 2 teams in the Big 12 that are in the bottom half in the country in pace, just 2. Oklahoma is dead last in the Big 12 at 302 out of 363 in possessions per game. Iowa State is the only other one, and Iowa State actually has a pretty rich recent basketball history. They recruit to, all that stuff. Showing up at Hilton's not a problem, stuff like that. And even that, that was an Iowa State team last year that had to make a surprise Sweet 16 run. They got it done, but as far as just making things happen, going to have to evolve a little bit if you're staying in the Big 12 and actually give the players some ownership of the offense.
Well, the good news is the schedule lightens up. They play nothing but ranked teams outside of Texas Tech the rest of the season. Think about what I just said. The Big 12 is disgusting, and they are at Baylor tonight, and they have Kansas coming in on Saturday. So when we're sitting here next Wednesday, and they have Kansas State coming to Norman next Tuesday.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Yeah.
So that's 3 top 15 teams before our next show. I'm guessing that this conversation is not going to be much better on next week's podcast.
Maybe that's what they need, is to play top teams, right? Alabama, right?
That's true. That's very true. What happened that day? We'll never know. That's the Sugar Bowl. It's the Sugar Bowl. It's an anomaly that will never be explained. And that's what that game was. And also, too, I need to say it again. The crowd for Bedlam was the best LNC crowd maybe of all time, and they totally wasted it, totally squandered and wasted it. That place, Ryan can attest, was dying to get into that game and to get juiced, and they literally, from the opening tip, just never even had a chance to. Total letdown, total squandering of that.
Here's a statement we never thought we'd have to say about the Lloyd Noble Center. OU had conversations of, do we have to put out a tweet that says we are packed, no one else can come into the building. Like, those were conversations that were had. Thankfully for Oklahoma, OSU was out early so well that people filtered out and it didn't become a fire marshal issue.
It was empty by the end, which is amazing because how full it was. There were people, hundreds, maybe even close to 1,000 or more, standing room only in the Lenoble Center. It was, but it was crazy. And yeah, OSU put a stop to that real quick. Rough stuff right now. That team is bad, and they play Baylor tonight. We'll see what happens. Women's team, meanwhile, they flipped it. It's the opposite. It's like both teams can't be playing well at the same time, I guess, because right when the men got their big Bama wins, when the women hit a little dip, men are back to being really rough, and the women are doing this again. They're going back up. They've won 3 in a row, and they won at Waco last night. Big win. And now Baylor's not what they usually are. They're not ranked, I don't think, right now, but they went into Waco and beat them. That's they're kind of the boogeyman of the Big 12. Baylor came to Norman earlier in the year and won. So you get that revenge payback last night. They won 3 in a row, playing good basketball. And again, as I've said a few times, to get top 16 is huge because you want your tournament games to be at home. Oklahoma seems to be in position to have a chance at least to do that. Big win last night. They're on a 3-game winning streak.
Yeah, the way you described Baylor's right. They're not the boogeyman they were, but they were in third place by a half a game behind Oklahoma. They beat Oklahoma in Norman by 11. They held a 12-point lead with 5 minutes to go. 12-point lead with 5 minutes to go. And in the final 25 seconds, they had a 5-point lead. 2 possessions, right? 25 seconds. 99.2% win probability, according to the ESPN basketball index, whatever. 99.2. You can't lose that kind of game. Like, you literally, it's impossible to lose that kind of game. And what do? Nevaeh Tot goes down, hits one of those Russell Westbrook coast-to-coast inbounds and just get the layup as quick as possible, right? Get 2 points on the board, cut it to 3, intercept the inbounds pass. Ana Yunusa intercepts the inbound pass, takes a couple of dribbles, kicks it out to Taylor Robertson. Who else? Taylor Robertson hits the tying 3. Baylor doesn't score, goes to overtime, and Yunusa is just fantastic in overtime. She scored 8 of her 20 points in overtime. Just phenomenal rally. And it's like they were down guys by a dozen. And you're thinking, okay, this is just not their night. They're going to go away. It's the exact opposite of what we just talked about with the men's team. Instead of the men's team has quit, they lost the locker room. It's the exact opposite. Guys, we're down 5 and we got 25 seconds to we can still win this game. Who believes that? One of the OU women's basketball team does.
Yeah, I don't want to undersell that pass by Yunusa to Taylor Robertson. That was not just kicks it out. That was, she is dribbling on the low block on what would be the near side, the hard cam side, whatever. She is in a spot where she probably goes up and hits a layup and OU's down 1, puts the pressure on fouls, whatever. Instead, like Hoove just said, she picks it up and fires it behind her head, kicks it out to Taylor Robertson, who is just like, y'all thought I was going to miss this? Jokes, Drano. And Nikki Collin, the Baylor coach, is over there going, I wonder what excuse I'm going to have to come up with this time because there was no delay in the game. I'm very, very frustrated, and I'm not the best loot now. Probably not being fair to Nikki Collin, though she is very unlikable for the 2 press conferences I've seen out of her. So then, yeah, in overtime, it was they took that momentum, and after the first minute and a half, it was basically like OU was playing a bucket up the whole time, and Baylor was having to cut it back. And I think you just see that the Bears realized this thing got away, and Oklahoma used that to kind of propel them across the finish line.
And I think, just to give credit where credit is due, when everybody was missing for Oklahoma, the lead had got to 12 and nobody was doing anything. I think at that point it was Liz Scott, like the 6th, 7th, 8th best player scoring wise on the team, right? Somebody who's consistent, but not dynamic, not explosive. She carried them through like 3 straight possessions where she hits a 3-point play and a couple of buckets. And you're like, okay, so they cut it from 12 to 5 thanks to her, and then that allowed them to cut that last little bit, that last little 5-point lead. So that's where Jenny Baranczyk just is able to elevate her team as a coach, as a sideline manipulator, right? As that bench coach who knows what buttons to push. she's fantastic at getting contributions from players that you might not think are going to contribute. And she does. She gets them to do these things and fill these little gaps and cross this little bridge. And all of a sudden you're down 5 and boom, you hit a couple of shots and send it to overtime. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can reach down on their bench and say, or anywhere in their lineup and say, we need you this time to carry the team for 4 straight possessions, whatever it is. She's able to do that. It's very impressive.
They're a fun team. And shout out Maddie Williams. What was it, Naismith mid-season watch list or team or something to that nature? Having a big season, obviously really good player for Oklahoma, very underrated among OU athletes in general.
Yeah. And she only scored 9 last night.
Right,
best player on the team. She just didn't have it scoring wise. So other people picked up the slack. It's impressive.
They're a fun team. Then they are back in action Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, 1:00 in the afternoon. They play at Kansas State as they try to finish their season. They're 19-4. I mean, having a really good year, and we'll see what they can do. Obviously, down the home stretch here, and then in Kansas City in the Big 12 tournament, as they try to, like I said, get the tournament games at home. That's the big thing about being a top 4 seed. You get to host your first 2 NCAA tournament games in the women's tournament. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Wrapping up here with some softball. The season starts tomorrow. Pretty wild. The diamond sports always sneak up. I say that all the time. And it has. It doesn't, I knew it was this week, but just even sitting here about to do the show, and I was like, man, they play tomorrow. Like, that's kind of wild. They opened the Mark Campbell Invitational. Ryan, obviously, our softball reporter, I helped him out with some media day stuff on Monday. Check that out if you haven't seen any of it. Got full press conference there with Patty Gasso along with a few players. Lots of content, all Sooners that Ryan's been busting out along with Ross. Ross Lovelace has been writing some stuff as well. Season starts tomorrow. We'll see what they can do. Can Oklahoma go for the 3-peat? We'll find out in short order here.
Before we turn it over to Ryan for his expertise, I just want to say he did an unbelievable job with the position previews. We had, if you haven't seen them, go to allsooners.com. Season position previews on the pitchers, the catchers, the infield, and the outfield. Wow. We got it all, and we've had it all for the past week or so. Stuff going up on the site. Nobody's covering softball like All Sooners is covering softball. I think we've had something like 13 stories on the softball team, and they haven't even played a game yet.
Yeah, there was a minute where we had published 10 straight pieces of softball content from the media day pressers to I was in there scheduling, and on the back end of our site, there's a little runner that has it timeline as far as date published. And I was scrolling. I was hold on, let me count. 1, 2. Oh, it's 10. It got all the way to 10. But no, we've had all of that up there. We are allsoftball.com this week. So head over there. Position previews, everything you want. Here will be the 2 or 3 headlines you're looking for this weekend, right? First, Jordy Ball is back. She is healthy. Patty Gasso said she's looking good, feeling good. Have a story up at All Sooners right now about kind of what that process was like from Patty Gasso's perspective for Jordy this summer, recovering from that forearm injury that obviously took away most of the postseason and had her pitching limited against UCLA and Texas in the Women's College World Series. Jordy Ball's going to play left field this year when she's not pitching at times. She's going to hit this year even if she's pitching. So she's going to be doing it all. And Patty Gasso last year had talked a little bit about not wanting to put too much on her plate too early. This year, she's like, nope, she's the athlete that can do it. It's happening. So you're going to see a ton of that. Something else to look out for is Patty Gasso. She came on with Chisholm and I on our radio show a couple of weeks ago, and then she circled back. Jada Coleman, they believe that Jada Coleman has added some power to her game. She already finished second on the team last year in batting average behind Jocelyn Allo. She drew only 2 less walks than Jocelyn Allo. Jocelyn was walked 54 times. Jada was walked 52 times. She's that spark at the leadoff spot where Patty Gasso last year had said that a leadoff walk for Jada Coleman is almost as impactful, maybe more impactful than a leadoff home run from Tiare Jennings. Well, now you're not going to have to pick one because Patty Gasso said she is swinging the bat a la Tiare Jennings. So that'll be something to watch at the top. And then I think this weekend, the thing to be most excited about if you're an Oklahoma softball fan is the schedule. I know that Oklahoma doesn't really have control of the multi-team events and things like that. But if you look through tomorrow, it's Duke. Duke is ranked, depending on where you look, 15 to 20. Liberty's a team that they'll play as well. They're not ranked, but they're receiving votes in a couple of the polls. Stanford on Friday, they're ranked. Washington on Saturday, they're ranked. Then you close out with San Jose State. That's something that Patty Gasso she's talked about the run rules, losing innings for her pitching staff, losing experience, all that stuff. Oklahoma went out of their way to make this thing as difficult as possible on themselves between Oklahoma State and Texas, who are ranked in conference, and everyone they're playing in the non-conference. Oklahoma's got 11 ranked opponents on the schedule this year using the ESPN.com USA softball poll, and Loyola Marymount's receiving votes and Liberty's receiving votes, like I said. So that's 13 teams probably in the top 30, 35 of college softball heading into the season that Oklahoma's got on the slate. I know that Oklahoma fans love the run rules, but for me, and I know for what Patty Gasso likes, those closer contests are a lot more exciting just because there's some intrigue. There's some. From remember back last year, one of my favorite games I covered was that Tennessee game where Oklahoma had to come back twice to win that thing. That was a ton of fun. Hoping to see a lot of that this year as they've got a ton of new faces. Transfers, Alex Dracco in the circle, Haley Lee, Sydney Sanders, who was a finalist for the Freshman of the Year last year alongside Jordy Ball and Alanya Torres. They should bring a lot of fresh energy to this team that is obviously a favorite and should win their third straight national championship, which would be the first time in 3 decades.
Ryan, I got to ask you this. 56-4, 59-3. And I think the number that was thrown out this week was 60% of their games over the past 2 years during this national championship run, 60% of their games were run rule victories. Neither one of those two things, I'm guessing, neither one of those two things is going to happen this year. How long until the Patty doesn't know what she's doing, we need to fire Patty, boo birds come out? I mean, seriously, people are going to be like, what's wrong with this team? They're not run ruling everybody. They've got 7 losses this year. What the heck? Going into the World Series. It just underscores how unbelievably dominant those teams were, how talented they were, kind of lightning in a bottle that Patty has captured. But also underscores, like you said, the schedule. It had some high points, but it wasn't just every week like this one is. It wasn't just every week like really good competitive games. They outscored the first month of the season in 2021 and 2022, I think, were similar.
Stupid.
They just outscored people like 85-3 or something like that. It was ridiculous. So What I'm saying is that's not going to happen this year. Temper your expectations. I still think Oklahoma wins the national championship. I just don't think it's going to be in a pillow fight like they've been doing to people the past 2 years.
Here's the flip side counterpoint that I am not courageous enough to raise this to Patty because you're not going to get an answer, right? But let's all put our thinking caps on. Oklahoma run ruled their way through regional play outside of the one close game against A&M that was then turned into an absolute just slugfest. Those are all tournament teams, obviously. Oklahoma, what did they do in super regional play? I don't believe they played 7 innings in either game against UCF. They got to the Women's College World Series, and they were run-ruling teams there as well. And they would have run-ruled in both championship series games if the run rule was in effect. So
that's true.
Keep in mind that while I know
the best and still run ruling them,
that I know that it's not going to be as many, and they may lose some games. So that would be the difference. That a typical weekend was if you played 5, 4 were a run rule, and maybe one of them gets you to 7 innings. I'm not expecting that, but I also want to say it's not out of the question that Oklahoma goes out to the Smart Campbell Invitational, comes out 5-0, and run rules 2 ranked teams. Because They were run ruling teams that were in the Women's College World Series. The best 8 teams in softball, Oklahoma was clearly a cut above everybody else. It's just the every single game thing that I think Patty's looking for.
And I think there's been talk too about this team being overall top to bottom better than those other 2 teams. So better than 56-4, better than 59-3. I'm going to have to see it to believe it, but when Patty Gasso says stuff like she was talking about at media day, just talking up the team, she's not afraid of expectations, and I love that about her. that she's like, yeah, if we're the best team, we need to go prove that we're the best team. I think we're the best team. I think we have a chance. She said last year, we have a chance to be the best team I've ever seen. And they were. So I just love that about her, the confidence that she has in the ability of these girls.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what they look like. I mean, for me, a few things that I'm definitely watching for. Jada Coleman for sure. Like Ryan said, they talked about how much power she's added. Jenny Carlson, Coleman pointed out, and it's true. I mean, she's put on muscle. She's been in there with Billy Bowman in the gym because she's bigger. I mean, you could just tell, like, yeah, she's going to hit bombs. You can tell just looking at her. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Jordy Ball hitting, I think, is obvious. She's going to play in the offense, play in the field more. Patty said that, so that's exciting. And then I think just the pitching depth is as good of any OU team recently. To have Ball and then Storako and then May and then the freshman Deal, maybe. I mean, that's a lot of good options. So the fact that you can have any one of those pitchers be fresh at any given time is scary for opposing teams, I think. So lots to like. It's hard to see where the losses are, even with how good the schedule is, because there's just so much.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. One of my takeaways from fall ball, and it's just fall ball, it's just practice, it's scrimmages, so don't take away too much. But one of my takeaways is Storako comes in as an All-American pitcher from Michigan, and she got rocked by this lineup. That's how good this lineup is. And then Ball, who is a fantastic hitter, watch her bat speed. She might have better bat speed than anybody on the team. She can rake, and she's hitting in the line drives and flyouts to the wall. She'll figure that out over the course of the season. She's going to post huge numbers, but I'm just saying, against that pitching staff, her numbers hitting wise, batting average wise, wasn't that great because she was hitting the ball on the screws and yet not getting a payoff from it.
And Patty said too that Ball is one of the fastest players. She's like a pinch running option at any time too, which is silly.
So Patty threw out there, and Patty this entire lead up to the season has been beating the Nicole May drum of she believes this is the best version of Nicole May that we're going to see. Patty threw out there that with the 4 pitchers they've got, they could theoretically go starter, middle reliever, setup man, closer. And I just want to see that in one of these high profile games, because that's not what we see in softball. But Patty's like, if I make an opposing lineup prepare for 4 pitchers, she didn't say this, but it's like, good luck. Good luck with that staff.
Yeah. That's a big advantage. We get into the postseason, all those games in close quarters, and you get a little taste of that this weekend. 5 games in 4 days. We'll have them all covered on AllSooners.com. They got Duke first tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Time. Then Liberty at 9. Friday night they got Stanford. Saturday night they have Washington, and then Sunday afternoon they finish up with San Jose State. So they'll have 5 games under their belt, and we'll recap it and break it down next week on the show as well. Pretty exciting. Get the Diamond Sports here rolling. Basketball is kind of doing this, so let's get some other sports in there here coming up, which is exciting. So softball season coming up. AllSooners have you covered. Ryan does a great job. Obviously, the rest of us will help as we can, but Ryan steers the ship on that softball coverage. Do have baseball season starting next week too. Baseball Media Day is going to be on Saturday before the Kansas game, basketball game. So we'll have some baseball stuff for you coming up here soon as well. Their season starts next Friday in Norman. So I look forward to getting out to the ballpark. Just feels like spring. Just feels good to be out to the ballpark. So that's coming up next week as well. Diamond Sports are upon us. All right, I think that's it. We covered a lot as per usual here on the AllSooners Podcast. We'll be back next week, next Wednesday, wrapping up softball's opening weekend. Like I said, preview a little bit of baseball, of course, recapping the latest from basketball teams, both men's and women's, and all the latest football news as per usual. You can catch that show on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners Podcast. It's also posted on our website, allsooners.com. Click on the playlist on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and you can watch all the shows as well on Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. That's it for us. We'll see you next Wednesday. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.